Warm welcome, dear children, back again to the class of biology. Now, in the previous class, we had discussed kingdom Monera in detail, where we talked about Archaebacteria and Eubacteria, right? And we learned that the bacterial cell is a prokaryotic cell, right? So, if you remember when we talked about the 5-kingdom system of classification, we had very briefly discuss the basis of classification, right? So just we'll quickly we'll compare kingdom Monera and Protista based on what we talked about when we had discussed the 5-kingdom system of classification, right? So we said that all Monerans are prokaryote, right? So that means they have a prokaryotic cell, right? And kingdom Protista are all eukaryotes, right? And kingdom Monera and kingdom Protista both are unicellular. Both are unicellular. So what we talked about, a question that is asked in the medical exams, name a unicellular eukaryote, right? So, or to which kingdom does a unicellular eukaryote belong to? So that is kingdom Protista. So the basic difference is that Monerans are prokaryotes and Protista is eukaryote. And then again, when we talk about prokaryotes and eukaryotes, then the first thing that comes to our mind is the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell, and that difference is regarding the nucleus, right? So the nucleus of a prokaryotic cell is not a membrane bound nucleus, right? The nuclear membrane is not present, whereas in a eukaryotic cell it has a true nucleus. It has a true nucleus. What does a true nucleus mean? It means that the nucleus is covered by a nuclear membrane. And here we will write true nucleus not present. Right? We studied the bacterial cell, and in that bacterial cell we saw that the nucleus, where in the central region of the bacterial cell, an entangled mass of DNA is there, which is called the nucleoid. That is the genetic material of the bacteria. So, right. So that is the kind of we can say a nucleus that the prokaryotic cell has. Right. So we don't call it a nucleus. We say that it is a nucleoid. Right. So that was the difference between Monera and Protista. And now today we will in detail talk about kingdom Protista, right? So what we have discussed earlier about kingdom Protista is that we know that all the animals, all the living organisms belonging to kingdom Protista are eukaryotes, and they possess a true nucleus, right? So let's quickly just go through the characteristics, the general characteristics of the organisms belonging to kingdom Protista. So we see that all are single cells. Single cell. Another term, unicellular. Right? So all the cells, all the living organisms belonging to kingdom Protista are single cell or they are unicellular. And then the second characteristic is that they are eukaryotes. And when they are eukaryotes, that means they possess a true nucleus, right? What else along with the true nucleus? All the membrane bound organelles are present. Right, so true nucleus and the membrane bound organelles are present. They are primarily aquatic. Mostly they are found in water. So primarily aquatic. Right, now when we'll study in detail these protistants, we'll see that mostly these organisms, they are found in water, although some may be found in moist terrestrial habitat also, but mostly they are found in water, so primarily aquatic. And when I mean aquatic, it means they can be, some of them are found in fresh water, some of them are found in marine water, some of them are found in stagnant water also, right? So primarily aquatic. Now this kingdom is basically a link between the plants and the animals, right? So it forms a link between the plants and the animals, right? So we can just say a link between other plants and animals, right? They are the primitive organisms, so they form a link between some plants and some animals also, right? And of course, their mode of nutrition, right? Now, their mode of nutrition, they can be heterotrophic as well as autotrophic. So, mode of nutrition, heterotrophs as well as autotrophs. So both are found. They show some of them show heterotrophic mode of nutrition, some of them show autotrophic mode of nutrition. And there is, if you remember, we talked about one organism which shows both kinds of nutrition, heterotrophic as well as autotrophic mode of nutrition, and we give it a term as mixotrophic mode of nutrition, right? Then we come to reproduction, right? So write it here. The next characteristic is reproduction. So basically asexual, and they show some kind of sexual reproduction as well. Some kind of sexual reproduction as well. We must remember that there's nothing as male and female, but by the formation of some gametes, they show sexual mode of reproduction also, right? Now, the last characteristic that we will discuss is the locomotion. Locomotion means how do they move, right? So, when we study in detail, we will see that there are some organisms which have flagella as their mode of nutrition, as the mode of locomotion. Some have cilia. If you remember, we talked about flagella. Flagella is a whip-like structure, right? And it helps in the movement of organism in water. It gives a whip-lash movement like this, right? Then we come to the next one, that is cilia. Cilia are also hair-like structure, much smaller than the flagella, right? And these cilia, they move in coordination, right? Cilia is present in whichever organism it is present throughout the body, all over the body, and it moves in a kind of coordination, right? So if one cilia is moving to the left, then all the cilia will be moving to the left, right? So that makes the movement a little faster. So cilia, and some we will see have pseudopodia. Pseudopodia. Pseudo means false, podia, foot. Pseudopodia, false feet they have, right? So I'm sure you must have learnt about amoeba, and you know how it moves, right? It moves through pseudopodia. So that's about the general characteristics of kingdom Protista. Right now, we will talk about the classification of kingdom Protista, and we will start with the first group of organisms belonging to kingdom Protista. Right? The first group of organisms that we will talk about are chrysophytes. Chrysophytes, also known as diatoms. Examples are desmids. Right? Chrysophytes, diatoms, or desmids. Now, what kind of organisms are these? Right, the general characteristics we've already learned that those general characteristics are present in all the groups that we will talk about. So it's there in chrysophytes also. Right, now they are also known as golden algae. Right, they're also known as golden algae. Now, these chrysophytes or diatoms are found in various shapes also. Right, they may be spherical, they may be rectangular, they may be triangular, and they may be semicircular also. Right, so these are the different shapes in which they are found. Right, so basically they are the diatoms. Example is desmids. They are also known as golden algae, and they are variously shaped. Right, so these are the shapes. Now again we talked about kingdom Protista, that they are primarily aquatic. Right, so these are found in fresh water as well as in marine habitats. So they are found in fresh water as well as marine habitat. Right, so purely aquatic. Right, not primarily, they're purely aquatic. They are microscopic. Right, they're unicellular, so they are microscopic, and their movement is as the water flows, in whichever direction the water flows, the chrysophytes, they float in that direction. Right, so basically how do they move? There's no such no kind of locomotory organ is present in diatoms, but they float with the current of water. Right, they also called planktons. A question in medical is asked about the locomotion of planktons. Right, so how do they float? They float on the surface of water in whichever direction the water moves. Right, so they're carried along with the water. They do not have any particular locomotory organ with the help of which they move. Right, so the next thing is the cell wall. Right, so a very typical kind of a cell wall they have. They have a cell wall basically that overlaps. Right, like a kind of a soap dish or a box. I'll just show you something like this that overlaps. You can see this is one surface, right, and this is another surface. So the upper one overlaps above the lower one. Right, so this is how the cell wall of the chrysophytes are also. Right, a very, very special kind of a cell wall, overlapping cell wall that they have. Right, and which we can say that one cell wall fits over the other. Right, so this is the kind of a cell wall that they have. And another characteristic feature of the cell wall is that they have silica present in the cell wall. Now, the silica that is present in the cell wall, what is silica? You must have seen sand, and when you look at sand, you'll find that there are some particles that shine, like glass-like appearance they have. We can say these silica particles are something like sugar crystals, right? So like that, these silica is impregnated in the walls of cell wall of chrysophytes, right? Now, what happens is, because of the presence of this silica on the cell wall, this becomes indestructible, cannot be destroyed. Silica as it is cannot be destroyed. So, here this becomes indestructible, right? Cannot be destroyed. And since the cell wall cannot be destroyed because of the presence of silica, we see that diatoms have left behind large amount of cells and cell wall deposits we can see over the years. So over billions of years, a lot of cell wall deposits are found, and that leads to the formation of diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth. Right? So the diatomaceous earth that is found, it is nothing but the leftover cell wall deposits of diatoms over thousands of billions of years. So it takes that much of time, that gets accumulated over those years, and that accumulation of the cell wall of diatoms is known as diatomaceous earth, right? Now, the soil being gritty, it is used in polishing. Now, this diatomaceous earth, it is used, it is of great economic importance also, right? So it is used for polishing, for filtration, etc., right? Filtration of oils, filtration of sugar, because of the gritty, rough, texture that it has, right? Now, each cell has a central vacuole, right? What is a vacuole? A satellite structure that is present inside the cell, and their nucleus is present inside that central vacuole, right? So where is the nucleus of the chrysophytes, the diatoms present? It is present inside the large central vacuole. Now, there are various pigments also present. So they have chloroplast or chromatophores present inside them, and then their mode of multiplication, right? We talked about the mode of reproduction. So their mode of reproduction, the common method of reproduction of diatoms is binary fission, right? Binary fission, that is the common mode of reproduction. Now, these diatoms are also indicators of pollution, right? They're good pollution indicators. So let's see, how are they good pollution indicators? So where are they found? They're basically found in water, right? So they are pollution indicators of what? Where they are found. So they indicate pollution in water. So they are great pollution indicators. Now, how do they indicate that pollution is there, the water is polluted? See, what happens is that they indicate water nutrient level, right? Water nutrient level, how much of nutrient is present in the water, and from where has that nutrient arrived in water? That is from the factories, the effluents that are released, things that are thrown in water. That leads to the increase of the nutrient level in water, right? And of course, later on, this leads to eutrophication. So these diatoms, they are actually, if we talk about the economic importance, one I told you is that they are used for filtering and for polishing. Then they are food for bigger organisms in water, right? They act as food. They are important source of food for other organisms also, for other aquatic organisms. And the presence of these diatomaceous earth or these bodies of the diatoms also indicate the presence of petroleum in that area, right? So, and another important economic importance is that they are used, you must have heard of soundproof rooms, right? So to make the rooms soundproof, these diatoms are used. So that again to eutrophication we were talking about, right? So they are pollution indicators, and they indicate the level of nutrient in the water. And from where does that nutrient come? I told you that it comes from factories or waste that are thrown in water, or effluents that are released from factories, sewage and other forms of pollution in water. Now what happens is, when those now these things are nutrients for the diatoms, food for the diatoms, we can say, right? So when there is a lot of food in the water, then the number of diatoms would increase, right? And diatoms themselves are food for other aquatic organisms like algae, right? When the number of diatoms increase, the number of algae also increase, right? And when the number of algae increases, that leads to eutrophication, right? And that tells, the increase in the number of algae tells that the water quality has gone down, right? So that indicates the level of pollution actually in water. When we say the nutrients in water, what do we mean by the presence of nutrients in water? It is the pollutants that are present in water that is, making the quality of water more worse. So that's about the chrysophytes, and we move on to the next group of protista. They are known as dinoflagellates. The next group is dinoflagellates. Di means two, and flagellate is the flagella, right? So the mode of locomotion, we talked that some of the organisms have flagella as their mode of locomotion. So here again, the presence of two flagella in dinoflagellates, right? They are also known as golden brown organisms, right? They're golden brown and they are photosynthetic protists, right? So they perform photosynthesis. They are golden brown in color and they perform golden brown. They are called, but you know there are many other pigments that are present in dinoflagellates, right? So they are variously colored also, but I think the most common type of dinoflagellates are golden brown in color, right? Other than that, they are variously colored because others have various pigments present in them, right? So mostly, of course, they are marine, right? So mostly they are found in seawater, so they are marine, and depending upon the pigment that is present in them, they may be yellow in color, green in color, red in color, brown in color, blue in color, and so on, right? So that depends upon the main pigment that is present in them. Now we come to the cell wall. The cell wall is very, very stiff, and you know there are cellulose plates that are present, right? So cellulosic plate-like structures. Now the presence of this cellulose plate gives it a structured appearance. You know, there's a kind of a design that is present on the cell wall. So the cell wall is thick, right, very firm, and there are cell plates that are present, right? They are arranged in a specific manner, so it gives a kind of a design to the cell wall. And since it gives design to the cell wall, they are also known as armored dinoflagellates. Armored dinoflagellates, right? Because of the designs on the cell wall. So they are called armored dinoflagellates, right? Basically, of course, they are unicellular and they are motile because the flagella is also present. Now, there is a specific arrangement of the flagella, right? The flagella is just not present like this. So, they are arranged in a definite manner, right? So, for example, this is the dinoflagellate, and as I told you that there are specific arrangement of the cell plates. So they are arranged like this. That is why they are called armored dinoflagellates, right? And di means two, so there are two flagella that is present. One flagella arises from the crevice that is here, right? And one flagella arises longitudinally, right? So there are two flagella present, and both these flagella, when we talk about the flagella, we will see that one flagella is a longitudinal flagella and the other flagella is a transverse flagella. Transverse flagella, right? So here what do we see is this is the longitudinal flagella, and from the crevice here is the transverse flagella that arises, right? So longitudinal and transverse, and from the furrow, or we can say the crevice of the cell plates, the transverse flagella arises, right? You can see the picture that I've put. You can see the different types of different types of dinoflagellates, and how the longitudinal and the transverse flagella, they arise differently in different ways in different types of dinoflagellates, right? So Again here, as I told you that they're variously pigmented. Now what happens is sometimes these dinoflagellates which have the red pigment present, right? And one of the examples of that dinoflagellate is Goniolax. Right? This is one of the dinoflagellates which have a red pigment present, and what happens is that they multiply at a very fast rate, right? And when they multiply at a very fast rate, then since they are marine, so the whole sea appears to be red, right? They multiply so fast and there's so many in number that it gives a red color, right? Because of the red pigment, so the sea starts appearing to be red in color. Now that red color, occurrence of that red color on the sea is known as red tide, right? So this red tide is actually because of Goniolax, or a dinoflagellate which has the red pigment present, right? So that is the red tide that we talk about on sea. So whenever you get to hear about the red tide, you must know that that red tide is because of the dinoflagellates, especially Goniolax, which has a red pigment present, and they multiply at a very fast rate, because of which the sea appears to be red in color, right? Nucleus, of course, is large in size, and then when they multiply at such a fast rate, also what happens is that they release certain toxins, and these toxins, when released in water, is harmful for other living organisms in water, right? Their toxin means it is poisonous, right? So it becomes poisonous for the other organisms such as fish that are found in water, right? So that's about the dinoflagellates, and we move on to the next group of kingdom Protista. The next group is euglenoids. Third group, euglenoids. Like example, euglena. Right? What we had learned about euglena is, we talked about their mode of nutrition. If you remember, when we had discussed the 5 kingdom system of classification, we had discussed about their mode of nutrition. Now, euglena is basically found in fresh water, also in stagnant water. Stagnant water. What is stagnant water? Water, like for example, if there is a ditch, right, and when it rains, the ditch gets filled with water and it remains like this for a long time. So the water is not able to flow or move, right? So it remains over there. So that is stagnant water, right? If you remember, when we talk about malaria, etc., or all those diseases that are caused by mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are the vector of those diseases. So we say that there should be no stagnant water. That means if there's water in the tank of the water cooler or in the bucket, we need to remove that. So that is stagnant water. A good place for these mosquitoes to lay their eggs, right? So that is stagnant water. So euglenoids are also found in fresh water as well as in stagnant water, right? Now, a very different characteristic is that they do not possess a cell wall. Do not have cell wall. Right. Now, instead of the cell wall, what do they have? Is they have a protein-rich layer which is called pellicle. Right. So, what do they have? There is presence of protein rich layer which is called the pellicle, right? So one of the main functions of the cell wall is that it gives shape to the body of the organism. Now the cell wall is not present, and instead of the cell wall, there is the presence of a protein rich layer which is called the pellicle, and this presence of pellicle, it makes the body flexible. It makes the body flexible. So there's a lot of flexibility that is seen in the body of euglenoids because there is absence of cell wall. And what does the cell wall do? The cell wall, it gives a rigid shape to the body of the organism. Now we come to the next characteristic feature of euglenoid, that is the flagella. Now euglenoids also have two flagella present, right? And we talked about dinoflagellates, even they have two flagella present. Now what is the difference in the flagella of euglenoids and dinoflagellates is, this is a euglena. Now they have two flagella. One flagella is big and there is another flagella which is small, right? Not very visible, right? So whenever we draw euglena, we generally show one big flagella, but they have a small flagella also, right? So that is the difference between the flagella of dinoflagellates and euglenoids. Dinoflagellates, they also have two flagella, but there is a specific position of the flagella, right? So in dinoflagellates, one flagella is longitudinally arranged and the other flagella is transversely arranged, right? Whereas in euglenoids, two flagella, one is long and the other is small, right? Then we had discussed about the mode of nutrition in euglena. If you remember that, when there is enough of sunlight, that is during the daytime, they behave as autotrophs and they can manufacture their own food. But during the evening or when there is more sunlight, then they behave as heterotrophs and they feed on other organisms, right? So that means they show a mixotrophic type of a mode of nutrition. So they have mixotrophic mode of nutrition, a mix of autotroph and heterotroph. So mixotrophic nutrition, right? So there's a pigment also that is present in euglena which resembles the pigment that is present in plants also, right? So multiplication is generally, that means the mode of reproduction, the common mode of reproduction in euglena is longitudinal binary fission, right? Longitudinal binary fission. Longitudinal means the body will divide longitudinally like this. Right? Transverse means it divides like this, transverse. So they show longitudinal binary fission. So that's about the euglenoids, and we move on to the next group of protists called slime molds. Right? The fourth is slime molds. Right? Now these slime molds are also known as protistan fungi. Protistan fungi. That means they show certain characteristics of protista because of course they belong to the kingdom protista, as well as certain characteristics of fungi, the next kingdom that we will study. Right? So that is why they are called protistan fungi. Right? Now their mode of nutrition is that they are heterotrophs, they are basically saprophytes. Saprophytes. Saprophytes means they cannot manufacture their own food and they depend for their nutrition on dead and decaying host. Right? So they depend for their nutrition on dead and decaying matter. So they are found moving where dead and decaying matter is present. Right? So they basically engulf those dead and decaying matter. Right? So they have a kind of an amoeboid shape at one stage of their life. Right? Amoeboid shape at one stage of their life, and this amoeboid shape that they have is a characteristic of protista. Right? And another stage of their life, they behave like spores. They have a spore-like structure, and spore is a characteristic feature of fungi. So that is how they resemble the kingdom fungi. That is why they are called protistan fungi. Right? So they engulf and under suitable conditions, right? That means when the environmental conditions are favorable, then they form an aggregation which is called plasmodium. Aggregation, a group, they all gathered together, and this whole group is called plasmodium. This aggregation of group is known as plasmodium, which may grow and spread even to several feet. Right? This may grow bigger and bigger when the number of these slime molds increase in the group where they are found. When they increase a lot, then the size of the plasmodium, that is the aggregation, goes on increasing, and it can even increase to several feet. That is during the favorable conditions, when the environmental conditions are favorable, right? But during unfavorable condition, what happens is that the plasmodium, this is favorable condition, and under unfavorable condition, what happens is that the plasmodium differentiates itself into different parts. That means what happens is, like for example, this is the plasmodium that is there. Then there are various parts that arise on the plasmodium, right? So then this whole structure is known as the fruiting body, and on the fruiting body we will find spores, right? So then what happens during unfavorable condition? The plasmodium, it differentiates itself into different parts. The whole body becomes the fruiting body, and on the body various spores are developed, right? So this happens during unfavorable conditions, that the fruiting body starts developing or bearing spores on their body. Now these spores are actually, they possess true walls also. They're very light in weight. They are resistant to any type of environmental condition. They can survive, right? And they are very light in weight, so they can be easily carried away by wind to different places, right? And whenever the favorable condition arises, then it can grow into slime molds, right? And because they are resistant, so they can stay alive in the form of a spore, like we can say that they remain dormant. They're alive inside, but they're not active, right? So for thousands of years, they can stay alive, right, in the form of a spore. That is how resistant the spores are, right? So as I told you that at one stage of the life cycle, they have an amoeboid structure, and at the other stage of the life cycle, they resemble the fungal spores, and that is why they are called the protistan fungi, right? So spore formation takes place in them also. So with that, we completed the group slime molds, and now we move on to the last group of kingdom Protista, and that is protozoa, right? Protozoans. We'll be talking about protozoans, right? So this word protozoa has been derived from a Greek word. The word proto means primitive and zoon, animal. So they are primitive animal, right? Not very well developed and very, very old. So they are called primitive animals, right? Now these protozoans, they are unicellular. They don't have a definite shape. We will say that not all of them, but there are some protozoans which do not have a definite shape. Their mode of locomotion could be cilia or even pseudopodia. Pseudopodia are false feet, right? So that is their mode of nutrition. They are microscopic organisms found in water and maybe even on damp soils or on decaying organic matter also they are found, right? So we can say that if they do not have a definite shape, so we were talking about the mode of locomotion. So the mode of locomotion in protozoans is by means of cilia, by means of pseudopodia, or even flagella, right? Again, we see that some of them, they do not have a definite shape, so they have an asymmetrical body, whereas some organisms have a symmetrical body, right? Their mode of nutrition, if we see, they are heterotrophs, so they may be found as parasites or even as saprophytes, right? Other than that, these organisms may possess one nucleus or maybe many nuclei. Some of them are, they have two kinds of nucleus, right? So they basically show dimorphism in their nuclei. So they have a bigger nucleus which is known as the macronucleus, and they have a smaller nucleus which is known as the micronucleus, right? So may have just a single nucleus, may have more than one nucleus, may have two nucleus, a bigger one known as the macronucleus and a smaller one which is known as the micronucleus, right? Again, another very important characteristic, or we can say a characteristic that resembles us, right? That there's one characteristic that is found in primitive animals like a protozoa, a unicellular organism. The same kind of characteristic is found in a complex body like the human beings, right? That is, they show holozoic mode of nutrition, right? Holozoic means there are 5 steps in this holozoic mode of nutrition, that is ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and egestion, right? We've discussed this in the earlier classes. So holozoic nutrition, right? And the reproduction, mode of reproduction is sexual mode of reproduction as well as asexual mode of reproduction, and the sexual mode of reproduction is by the formation of gametes, right? Now we come to the 4 groups under protozoans. So we'll quickly go through the 4 groups of the protozoans. The first group are the amoeboid protozoans, right? So that is the amoeba. Amoeboid protozoan is the amoeba, right? And we see this is the plasma membrane. The outermost membrane is the plasma membrane. We can see that it has a nucleus present, then it has a contractile vacuole present, and their mode of locomotion is the presence of pseudopodia, right? Now pseudopodia functions as a locomotory organ as well as it helps in engulfing the food particle. So what does the pseudopodia do? It surrounds the food particle and the food particle enters the body of amoeba, right? So basically there are 2 functions of the pseudopodia, that is locomotion as well as trapping or engulfing of the food particles. Those amoeboid protozoans which are found in marine habitat, they have deposition of silica. They have a silica shell outside their body as a protective layer, right? So end amoeba is an example of amoeboid protozoan. End amoeba, right? Now these amoeba, some of them are parasitic also, and they cause diseases like amoebiasis. Amoebiasis is a kind of amoebic dysentery, right? So dysentery is loose motion along with oozing of blood in the motion. So that is amoebic dysentery, right? We move to the next group of protozoans. The first was the amoeboid protozoans, and the next one are flagellated protozoans. So flagellated protozoans, I told you that the mode of locomotion in protozoans could be pseudopodia, cilia or flagella. So these are flagellated protozoans. So basically they have flagella present as their locomotory organ. Right, so one of the example of a flagellated protozoan is trypanosoma. You must have heard of sleeping sickness, right? So nucleus will draw trypanosoma, right? If you look at trypanosoma, this is one flagella that is present, and this is a flagella that is almost hidden, right? Found in it is actually attached to the body of trypanosoma, right? So one of the flagellated protozoans is trypanosoma. They are a parasitic organism. Some of the organisms belonging to flagellated protozoans are free living also, but basically trypanosoma, if we talk about, they are parasitic organisms, and they cause the disease sleeping sickness. Sleeping sickness. The word sleeping sickness is because in this disease what happens, there is a disorder, sleeping disorder. From there the name sleeping sickness. Sleeping disorder. Sleeping pattern is disturbed, and it is a vector-borne disease. How does the trypanosoma enter the host organism? Is through a fly which is known as the CC fly. Now the CC fly, it sits on, the alphabet T is silent here, it sits on all dirty things, right? Wherever there's filth or garbage there, or maybe all dirty places, they sit over there. And when they sit in such places, then what happens? These trypanosoma, they are microscopic, they are found in those places, they stick to the body, and when this fly sits on other food materials which is eaten by the people, the trypanosoma from the CC fly is transferred to the host body, which leads to the disease sleeping sickness, right? Next we come to, and in sleeping sickness what happens? What are the symptoms of sleeping sickness? That a person suffers from fever, headache, joint pains, itching, etc. Right? So these are the symptoms of sleeping sickness. Next we move on to the next group of protozoans, that is ciliated protozoans. Next is ciliated. Right? So from the word ciliated, presence of cilia as the locomotory organ. Right, so ciliated protozoan, so in the example of a ciliated protozoan is paramecium, right? A slipper-like animalcule, paramecium. Slipper shaped, right? And here this is one protozoan which shows the presence of dimorphic nucleus, right? Dimorphic, the presence of two nuclei. One is the bigger nucleus known as the macronucleus, and here this is the micronucleus. The micronucleus actually contains the genetic material. Right, so we talked about cilia earlier. The cilia, there are thousands of cilia found all over the surface of the body, and they have a coordinated movement. Whenever we are boating, the oar that is used, if there are more than two oars used, then the people using the oar, we see that they move it in a particular direction, right? So all the oars move in the one and the same direction. The same way the cilia also moves, right? So if one cilia is moving to the right, then all the cilia of that side will move towards the right direction. So that is how they move, and because of the presence of so many locomotory organs on the body, the movement is slightly faster as compared to the other organisms, right? The difference between cilia and flagella is that flagella, there are either one or two flagella found in the body, and they are bigger and longer, whereas cilia, they are very small hair-like structures found all over the surface of the body, right? Now when we look at this structure here, we will see that in between the two membranes there is a gap here. Now this gap that is there is known as gullet, right? So what happens? The paramecium is found in water. It's an aquatic organism, and the food is, there in the water, and so the food laden water would enter the gullet, and from the gullet it enters the body of the paramecium, right? So that is how the food enters the body. So they are aquatic and they are actively moving organisms because of the presence of cilia, right? This is the cavity that they have, which is known as the gullet, and the water laden food enters the body of the paramecium through the gullet, right? And of course, presence of cilia shows coordinated movements. Paramecium is the example. And now we come to the last group of protozoans. They are known as sporozoans. Sporozoans, presence of spores, right? So from the spores, they are sporozoans, right? Now it includes those organisms that have an infectious spore-like stage, right? So presence of spores. So the spore stage is the infectious stage that is present in the life of these organisms, right? So they have an infectious spore-like stage in their life cycle. Infectious spore-like stage in their life cycle. And the most notorious of the sporozoans is Plasmodium, that causes malaria. Plasmodium is a protozoan that causes malaria. Again, this malaria is a vector-borne disease, right? It causes malaria, and malaria is a vector-borne disease. Vector means there's a carrier of this Plasmodium protozoan. The carrier is the female Anopheles mosquito, right? Female Anopheles mosquito, which lays eggs in stagnant water, right? And the female Anopheles mosquito, if has Plasmodium, and when it bites the host organism, it transfers the Plasmodium to the host organism, and that is how the person suffers from malaria, right? So basically this group of organisms, they are parasitic and they have two hosts, right? So their sexual stage takes place inside the mosquito, and the asexual stage of reproduction takes place in the mammalian or even in birds, right? In mammals and even in birds. So they have two stages, right? The first stage, that is the sexual stage, takes place in mosquitoes, and the second stage, that is the asexual stage, takes place in mammals and even in birds, right? So they show two stages, right? And these sporozoans, they lack locomotory organs. Locomotory organs are not present in sporozoans. Now, what are the symptoms of malaria? Since we are talking about malaria, we'll quickly talk about the symptoms also. Fever, chills, when the person feels cold, and then there's sweating, a lot of sweating also. And this basically after a few weeks after being bitten by the female Anopheles mosquito, these symptoms like fever, sweating, chills are shown in the host organism, right? So that's about the sporozoans. So a quick recap of what we did today. We talked about kingdom Protista, right? We discussed the general characteristics of kingdom Protista, and under kingdom Protista we studied about chrysophytes, we talked about dinoflagellates, we talked about euglenoids, we talked about slime molds and protozoans. And under protozoans, there were four types: amoeboid protozoans, flagellated protozoans, ciliated protozoans, and sporozoans. So that's about for today's class. And again, there's some questions that are given at the end of the video, you can go through those questions and complete your assignments. Thank you.